It wasn't just that Cynthia and I hadn't been close for a while. It was a way to become so normal, so unremarkable that neither of us seemed to care anymore. We'd been married for 7 years by then. The honeymoon phase had long since ended, sure, but we should figure out how to make things work by now. The distance between us was no longer something we even noticed. Our routine felt more like two roommates coexisting rather than a married couple. Her side of the bed might as well have been a different country. There were no affectionate gestures, no kisses goodbye, no random touches, just an endless silence. I told myself it was work stress, maybe hormones, anything that made it easier to ignore the truth. Then came Edward's birthday party. It was a casual backyard gathering with string lights above, cold beer and coolers, people laughing around a stone fire pit. For once, Cynthia seemed genuinely happy. She joked, smiled at strangers, and even touched my arm when we arrived, pretending for everyone. For a moment, I almost convinced myself it was real. Edward raised his beer and asked, "Serious question. Who's got it better, the newlyweds or us old married folks?" People laughed and tossed out answers. Cynthia stepped forward, holding a glass of wine. She flashed a bright smile and leaned in toward the group, saying, "For Donald, intimacy is a gift I give him when he's a good boy and only on my schedule." The laughter came in waves, loud and ugly. Someone elbowed me playfully, and a few of the women laughed even harder. I forced a smile and took a drink to mask the sting. But it wasn't just a joke. It was how comfortable she was with it, how proud she seemed of herself, standing there, knowing she humiliated me in front of everyone. The rest of the night was a blur. Cynthia laughed too loud. I nodded along, drank too much, and pretended it didn't hurt. When we got home, she kicked off her shoes, poured herself another glass of wine, and sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I stood in the hallway for what felt like an eternity, watching her, realizing just how invisible I'd become in my own marriage. This wasn't just a rough patch. This was over. The only difference now was that I was finally ready to stop pretending. From that point on, I stopped trying. No more asking if she wanted coffee or sending her silly memes. No more reaching across the distance between us. Cynthia didn't seem to notice, and if anything, she seemed relieved, like my silence made things easier for her. In the mornings, I started waking up earlier than I needed to. I'd drive down to Benny's diner, the one she always called gross, and grab a coffee. I'd sit in the parking lot with the windows down, just breathing. It didn't fix everything, but it reminded me that I was still alive at home. We moved around each other like strangers. Cynthia continued to scroll through her phone, and I kept busy fixing small things around the house or flipping through a book that I wasn't really reading. One night, she looked up at me over the rim of her wine glass. "You've been awfully quiet lately," she said as though it were mildly annoying. I shrugged. "Guess I don't have much to say." She studied me for a moment, almost as if she were trying to figure out if I was angry or broken. Then she gave me a tight, dismissive smile and went back to her phone. The old me would have tried to fix things, would have apologized for things that weren't even my fault. But not anymore. At the gym, I started lifting heavier and running harder. Not for her, not for anyone, but for me. I could feel pieces of myself returning. Parts one didn't realize I had given away. Cynthia never asked where I was going when I stayed out late. She didn't text to check in. She didn't care, and that told me everything I needed to know. It didn't take long for Cynthia to notice something had changed. One night, I came home later than usual, and she was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, a glass of wine half empty beside her. "You're out late," she said, her voice casual, but her eyes sharp. I shrugged, kicking off my shoes. Gym ran long. She watched me like she didn't quite believe it. "New routine, huh?" "New priorities," she said, her voice edged with something I couldn't quite place. I didn't answer, just kept walking into the kitchen. I could feel her staring at my back, trying to decipher the shift in me. Later that week, she tried to be sweet, made my favorite lasagna, wore the soft old sweater she knew I liked, brushed against me when she passed by in the hallway. The old me might have melted, but the new me just smiled politely and kept moving. One night, she sat next to me on the couch instead of curling up at the far end. "You've been different lately," she said, tucking her legs under her. "Yeah," I said, not taking my eyes off the TV. "Feels good." She laughed lightly, trying to keep it playful. "You're not having a midlife crisis, are you?" "Nope. Just realizing what matters for the first time." I saw a flicker of real fear cross her face. She started asking where I went after work, who I was texting, why I was dressed nice at the gym. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, she'd acted like I barely existed. Now that I wasn't predictable anymore, she was panicking. I didn't explain myself. I didn't argue. I didn't give her anything. And that silence drove her crazy. The truth landed in my lap when I least expected it. I ran into Evan, Edward's brother, at the gas station one Sunday afternoon. We exchanged pleasantries, talked about work and the weather. Nothing important. Then, as he grabbed a soda, Evan hesitated. "By the way," he said, almost like an afterthought, "I saw Cynthia the other day downtown." I glanced at him, keeping my face neutral. Yeah, she was with some guy I didn't recognize. They looked close. I kept my voice steady. "When was that?" "Thursday afternoon, I think. Around 3. I nodded once. "Good seeing you." He picked up on a change in my tone, gave a quick, awkward goodbye, and left. I stood there for a moment, letting the cold air from the cooler wash over me. Thursday. Cynthia had told me she was running errands that day. When I got home, I waited until she was in the shower, then did something I never thought I would do. I checked her phone. It wasn't hard. She never bothered to change the passcode. Buried inside a folder labeled Budget Apps was the real secret, a second messaging app. I scrolled through the messages. They were all there. Pictures, flirty texts, plans for weekends, jokes about me. "He's so boring. He's like living wallpaper. Don't worry, he'll never find out. He's too passive." I scrolled through more photos. Him, Chase grinning shirtless. The guy who thought he could replace me. I closed the app, forwarded the worst messages and photos to my private email, careful not to make any mistakes. Then I deleted the forwarding history and locked my phone. It wasn't rage. I felt more like something cold or something final. I stepped out onto the back deck while she blow-dried her hair, taking a moment to think. There was no speech that would fix this. No confrontation would bring satisfaction. The cleanest revenge wasn't a fight. It was a quiet, perfect exit, leaving her standing in the ashes she created. The next morning, I began executing the plan. While Cynthia got ready for her day, I was already several steps ahead. I opened a private account at a different bank, transferred my paycheck, froze our joint savings. I wasn't reckless. I was precise, clean cuts, no mess. At lunch, I met Lisa, a lawyer I had discreetly researched weeks before. She was sharp, no nonsense. I showed her my phone and she read the messages slowly, her face expressionless, except for a small nod when she finished. Lisa confirmed that I had more than enough proof of infidelity, hidden finances, and leverage that could keep it clean and quiet. She assured me there would be no drama unless Cynthia started it. I leaned back in my chair, agreeing. By the end of the week, I'd rerouted everything important into my name. Credit cards canceled. Streaming services I paid for gone. On Friday, Cynthia tried to order sushi after work, but the card was declined. She called from the restaurant, frustrated. "Donald, the bank says our account's frozen. What's going on?" I smiled to myself, leaning against the kitchen counter. Must be a glitch. I'll look into it. That night, she wore the red dress I once loved, sitting close to me on the couch, laughing too hard at a movie she wasn't even watching, testing the waters. I stayed polite, cool, detached, letting her squirm. Saturday morning, she asked if I wanted to join her for brunch with her friends. Nah. I replied, tie my sneakers, got plans. Her confusion seeped into her voice. Since when? I smiled. Since now. By Tuesday night, everything was ready. The house was in my name. The finances were secured. The divorce papers sat neatly on my desk. I just had to pick the right moment to deliver them. And I already knew exactly when that would be. I didn't have to wait long. Cynthia had a self-care weekend planned at some yoga retreat 2 hours out of town. I already knew the truth. She wouldn't be alone, and it sure wasn't for yoga. Saturday morning, she rushed around the house packing leggings and makeup into a small bag. "You'll be okay without me for a couple of days?" she asked sweetly. I smiled. "I'll survive." She kissed my cheek quickly and distractedly and left without a second glance. As soon as her car disappeared down the road, I moved into action, changed the locks, locked down the bank accounts. By the time she hit the highway, the life she thought she controlled was already gone. I didn't follow her, didn't blow up her phone. I wasn't interested in a confrontation. I just waited. Around noon, I sent her one text. "When you get back, don't bother coming home. Papers will be delivered Monday." No punctuation, no threats, just the end. Her first reply came 10 minutes later. "What are you talking about?" Then more. "We need to talk. You're blowing this out of proportion. Donald, stop being dramatic. You're not like this." I didn't answer any of them. I deleted every message without reading more than the first line. I was busy back at work picking up new projects, hitting the gym harder, eating better, sleeping better, living better. One evening after a late workout, Kelsey, someone I knew from the gym, stopped me outside as I was leaving. "You hear about Cynthia?" she asked. I raised an eyebrow. "No, don't care to either." She laughed. "Well, she moved into a tiny apartment over by 9th Street. Chase dumped her. Guess he wasn't long-term after all." I just nodded, letting the news settle like dust on an empty road. No satisfaction, no gloating. Just confirmation that the life she'd gambled everything on had fallen apart. A few days later, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, I saw her again. I was grabbing coffee at Starbucks when she walked in, her hair damp, wearing a sweater too big for her frame. She spotted me and froze for a moment. It looked like she might cry or beg. Instead, she gave a small, sad smile. "You look good, Donald." I nodded politely. "I feel good. Nothing cruel, nothing extra." I picked up my coffee and walked past her, just another stranger in line. And honestly, that's all she was now. A few days after that last awkward encounter at Starbucks, Cynthia sent one last text. "I'm sorry for everything. I really am." I stared at it for a second, then deleted it without replying. Forgiveness wasn't what I needed. Closure wasn't a conversation. Closure was a choice, and I had already made mine. The real betrayal wasn't the cheating. It was the years of contempt, the slow, quiet erasure of who I was until I was nothing but furniture in my own life. But that was done now. On Saturday morning, I sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee, the cool breeze rolling in from the field behind the house. The same house Cynthia used to decorate for parties, for show, for appearances. Now it was just mine, simple, quiet, real. I thought back to that night at the party, standing around the fire pit, while everyone laughed at my expense. Cynthia's voice sweet and mocking. "Intimacy is my gift if he's a good boy, only on my schedule." I smiled at the memory. Not bitter, just clear. She thought the power was hers to keep. She never realized I was the one who allowed it until I took it back. For the first time in years, the silence around me wasn't heavy. It wasn't cold. It was mine, no one else's, not something forced on me, not something I endured to keep the peace. Mine. I leaned back in my chair, stretched out my legs, and let the morning settle into my bones. No noise, no chaos, no masks, just a quiet life I had built for myself. And the one promise I would keep from now on, I'd never hand my silence over to someone who didn't know how precious it was. Not ever again.